Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. I say, when they go low, we go local. Hi, I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this is The Breakdown. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Legal AF for all things at the intersection of politics and law. So today I'm breaking down what state law options are available when you've got folks like ICE out here running our communities ragged and using excessive force and violating people's constitutional rights. So traditionally, we've always been like, okay, what can we do on the federal level? How can we file a federal lawsuit to be able to get accountability? But as we're seeing now, the feds aren't where it's at. It's about using state and local resources and finding state level remedies. So I'm going to break down how we can do this. So, state of play. Traditionally, we would use Section 1983. So that's 42 USC Section 1983. That is, you've probably heard like 1983 lawsuits, 1983. That is the statute that most civil rights lawsuits are based on. That's been the tool to be able to move police brutality lawsuits forward, etc. Right? Here's the thing. It only applies to state or local actors, not federal officials. Crazy, right? It's a federal law that does not apply to federal officials. Riddle me that. The federal equivalent for federal officers, which was something, again, that was an avenue for relief. Well, the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, basically narrowed it out of existence. Like they just basically chipped and chipped and chipped away till it basically has no use. And that was the Bivens case, right? So also there's a Federal Torts Claim Act, which is another way to be able to sue, but it's super, super narrow in how it's able to be used. And there's so many immunities and a ton of procedural hurdles. So as a result of that, people who have been violated by federal agents are kind of stuck because there's very few federal options. However, there is a growing movement of what's called a converse 1983 approach, where it's basically state law creating causes of action that allow people to sue anyone, including federal officers, for violating federal constitutional rights under state statute or common law. And so states can amend their existing civil rights statutes or create new ones so that they can cover federal officers who violate federal rights. So at the way things are looking right now, this state law pathway is going to be critical. It's not like a backup option. This is going to be the option, right? So here's how we can get to it, right? So on a state level, if a state statute allows a private right of action for a violation of constitutional rights. So in other words, you as an individual can sue another individual for a violation of constitutional rights. Not every state allows that, but if you're in a state where you can do that, then a survivor of police violence, ICE violence, could sue federal officers in state court. And states can choose to interpret their existing civil rights statutes to go after federal officials, or local legislators would have to, or state legislators would have to change the existing laws to explicitly say any person rather than being only a state or local official can be touched by this law. So you got to add another category to make sure federal officers are included. On top of that, you can have common law state torts. So not going to go down the rabbit hole of what a tort is, but basically things like assault, battery, false arrest, malicious prosecution, wrongful detention, those are ways to be able to sue someone in civil court. These aren't criminal options, this is civil court. But then the question becomes, can the state sue a federal officer under state tort law? So some states say, yeah, so that could be an avenue. Again, is going to be based on the state's current law or the changes that they can make. Of course, you got to deal with issues around, could the defendants be like, hey, we've got immunity, because we've been operating as federal agents. We had a legitimate reason to be in whatever location or to grab whatever person because we were serving an immigration warrant, whatever the case may be. Usually you get immunity if you're operating within the confines of your job. But again, there's an argument to be made that if you're punching people, that goes outside of the parameters of your job. So there's that. So also, we've been seeing this already, how cities and counties will have ordinances where they're like, listen, we don't cooperate with ICE, period, end of story. We don't mess with that. They can also impose additional oversight, so kind of like civilian oversight panels to look at what the federal agents are doing in their particular jurisdiction, or they can require local agents to record and report federal operations, so wearing a body-worn camera. And they can also implement data transparency rules as well as a local complaint process. So like, hey, I got violated by ICE. So rather than I got to go to the DOJ's Office of Civil Rights, you can go to your local, courthouse or your local, a local body that will take that complaint for you. So you don't have to like schlep all over the place and try to figure it out, right? So it doesn't create necessarily a new way to go after a federal agent, but it creates ways to be able to get that evidence, that documentation, the complaints. And then that way, local law enforcement or local prosecutors can then start again building their cases around the overreach of ICE agents. Now, prosecutors are really key in this mix as well. So state and local prosecutors can bring charges in state court if a federal agent commits crimes under state law. So think assault, kidnapping, unlawful detention, use of excessive force. So Larry Krasner out of Philly, listen, he was not mincing any words. He came out and said that if a federal law enforcement officer, breaks state law in Philly, so for example, kidnap people jumping out of vehicles, if they engage in crimes, even if they happen to be law enforcement, this district attorney's office is going to hold them accountable. There's that. So while, of course, there's a caveat, while prosecutors can't prosecute federal agents for acts authorized under federal law. So again, that acting within federal jurisdiction, but prosecutors can still investigate and prosecute where the acts violate state criminal laws, and the agents don't have immunity, right? So there's another way to be able to go after it. So let me break down some real world examples. I touched on Philly, and I'm going to come back to them in a minute. But let's hop on over to San Francisco. So California has a civil rights statute, it's called the Bain Act, and that prohibits interference or attempted interference with constitutional or statutory rights, including by force, threat, or intimidation. So there is a pathway to be able to use that text to go after ICE agents. But again, all of this is happening in real time because, yet again, we've never had to deal with anything like this before. But Brooke Jenkins, the San Francisco district attorney, she wasn't sleeping. She was watching what was going on in Chicago. She saw what was happening to LA. And in preparation for what everyone was thinking was going to also happen in San Francisco, she said, listen, if federal agents came to her city and did the same, she was going to treat them like anybody else breaking the law, and she was going to prosecute them. She already talked to the San Fran Police Department about arresting federal agents for clear excessive use of force, and they're like, okay, we're with it, let's do it. So California, and specifically San Francisco, they're a really good example of how a state civil cause of action plus having local policy coming from a strong prosecutor can create a pathway to hold rogue agents accountable. Let's hop on over now. I'm going from West Coast all the way to the East Coast. So I'm going to stop in the middle at Evanston in Illinois. So the mayor of Evanston, Daniel Biss, is opening 2 investigations into a recent incident where ICE agents were caught on video punching someone. So the two investigations he opened was one into the violence federal agents used against people he said were innocent bystanders, and one investigation into an incident where ICE agents deliberately crashed a car into someone. And so basically what the mayor alleges is that Border Patrol agents deliberately caused an accident, a car accident, by intentionally braking while being followed by another vehicle. And so also, Evanston has a new policy that requires local police to get the badge numbers of the federal agents involved in any of these actions. So now they have the evidence because they can identify the people who are involved. That's been the biggest issue. When dudes are jumping out of vans with masks on, you don't know who's who, but you get that badge number, you can now trace it back to a person for accountability. So local governments can be proactive. Even if the state statute is kind of like less robust, there's still a way for locally, if you get your local policies together, get your ordinances together, have that oversight from the city or the locality, that's a way to be able to move this forward. Coming back to Philly, we talked about what DA Larry Krasner said, but also this is in conjunction with Philly's local government, where they said, listen, we're not cooperating with ICE. So you've got the prosecutor, you've got the local government all on the same page. So that makes it easier for there to be a path forward to hold ICE agents accountable. So what does this mean for all of us? Well, first of all, if you or someone you know has been a victim of ICE violence, or you witness ICE violence, make sure to document everything you can. Date, time, identity of the officers, if you can get the badge number, location, have that video, photo evidence, get the names of the people around you so you have those witness names, look at whether or not the person was injured. And again, this is all based on what you can see, right? I'm not saying that you need to go insert yourself in the situation, but if you see somebody get rammed by a car and you see them, clearly not able to walk afterwards, you document like, hey, person appeared to have had a broken leg or something along those lines, right? If it's you or someone you know, make sure to get legal counsel. This is not something you're going to ride out doing on your own. And so legal counsel can help evaluate whether or not there's a way to go after these agents criminally from a state or local level. And also if there's other ways that you can file a complaint that would be in conjunction with any criminal law enforcement possibility, or civil as well, a civil lawsuit. So remember, civil lawsuits, that's about money or getting someone to stop doing a certain thing, basically an injunction, right? And then criminal, obviously going to prison. So your attorney can figure out which pathway is going to be the best and kind of give you guidance around that. As a community, we should be all engaging with advocacy and local policy change. So work with, local advocacy groups that are trying to pass certain ordinances to limit the power that ICE agents and others would have in your communities. That would force transparency or reporting of operations and ways to hold agencies accountable if they assist in federal misconduct. So there's all things to consider. Now, of course, there's going to be challenges because qualified immunity is a big open question on this. Are the feds going to be able to use this on the state level? Can state court keep jurisdiction over these cases? What about the political will, right? Because we've seen instances around the country where localities tried to fight back cooperating with ICE. And then the governor, I'm looking at you, Florida and Texas, the governor puts pressure on these localities being like, we're going to cut funding, we're going to do all these things to you, we're going to remove you from office if you don't agree to work with ICE. So you've got the whole political will issue going on. And then, of course, the evidence gathering challenges, right? Because again, if the federal agencies we know, ICE, DHS, they're not going to respond to any requests, right? So where you're going to get the evidence to be able to push this case forward. That's why local advocacy groups are going to be so important in being able to do this, as well as people who witness these types of acts, taking video, taking pictures, and sending that to local groups to be able to push these cases forward. So at the end of the day, there are options other than just federal courts to go after ICE agents who are using excessive force. A lot of these pathways are new. A lot of these pathways are underused, but there is a way forward. So, thanks for watching. Sound off in the comments. What are your thoughts about the going local strategy and whether or not state courts will be able to hold ICE agents accountable? I'm Melba Pearson, also known as the Resident Legal Diva, and this was The Breakdown. Stay safe, stay informed, and keep demanding justice. Take care.
In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.